Hi, everybody. We're starting our broadcast, and as all of the attendees start to come into the room, I just always want to take the opportunity to say thank you for joining us. Heather came to us, Heather Elder came to us, gosh, 12 weeks ago now, Heather, with the idea of having a weekly webinar about where we are now, and here we are. This is number 10 in terms of our broadcast, and I cannot believe it was 12 weeks ago when we first started to talk about this. But we're happy to partner with her, and each week we've been doing different topics. But this week we're going to do a part 2 of last week, just because we didn't really get to everything, and it's such an important and relevant conversation. So we wanted to continue it. Right now, it's important for me to give a slight disclaimer. So this is a disclaimer for everyone who's on our panel. You know, all the guidelines, ideas, and concepts discussed and shared today are reflective of important but evolving conversations. It is all a work in progress and part of continuing development. Everyone needs to develop their own policies, procedures with standards, plans, and planning, which inform your policies, contracts, and waivers, et cetera. And you need to consult your team in terms of your insurance and your lawyer and things like that. So just keep that in mind, that this is an important conversation to get people thinking about what they need to be doing, but it is in no way, you know, a roadmap necessarily that you should specifically follow, although we may give you some references to, you know, resources where you can check things out and so that you can stay on top of everything. So I would like to introduce our panel. I'm going to start with Doug Roy. Doug is an angel. Let's just go right there, because he was on our panel last week and he came back for more. So yay, Doug. And he's a partner with Cypress LLP. That's a boutique law firm here in Los Angeles. He's worked with artist reps and production companies in the still photo world for 10 years, handling all aspects of business law, including litigation, employment, IP, antitrust, and corporate governance. He's worked with clients such as Giant Artists, Apostrophe, iForward, Portfolio One, 3 Star, and others. And something personal about Doug is that he has a 6-year-old and has found out that he is a better lawyer than a kindergarten teacher. So, you know, we're all thinking about you and hoping that, you know, you're doing okay with all of that. Katie Boonsma, I don't think I ever pronounced your name correctly, Katie.
No, it's Bunsma.
Bunsma. I don't know why I do that, and you still are my friend. So thank you for that. So Katie is an art producer at Saatchi & Saatchi. Accounts that she works on is Toyota and Global Olympics. Okay, Katie, you're going to have to explain this one to me, because it is a tongue twister and it's not really fair because I stumble at these things. But something personal about Katie is she once saw Moby. What?
Well, this is just like a funny anecdote. I once saw Moby at Moby's restaurant stealing his book, Moby, on a first date while I was waiting for a table. I just think it's like the funniest, most ridiculous thing I've ever seen in my entire life. So I figured we'd start out with that.
Thank you. That is awesome. I'm going to move on to Michael Kaminsky. Did I do that right, Michael? Okay, so he's an EP director of production at Juice Pharma Worldwide, with clients like Merrick, Pfizer, Novartis, and Biogen. The personal thing about Michael that we should know is that as soon as this pandemic is over, he's on the first flight to Cuba.
No doubt.
So then I'd like to move to Richard. Richard Gall is the executive producer of Planet Pre-Pro in New York. He produces around the world directly for clients, agencies, and photographers with his genius business partner and producer extraordinaire, Scott Davis. Something personal about him is his 3 boys, Tyler, Aiden, and Dylan, are what keeps his heart running. He loves cooking and solving problems. Moving into Jamie Vance. She's the executive producer for Sweet Genius. Jamie is proud to be the wife as well as a mother of a 10-year-old boy and a 4-year-old very mixed very mixed breed Cece. She's although a native New Yorker, she has called Los Angeles and Atlanta home, but now produces in Charleston, South Carolina. Little known fact is that she worked for the CDC many moons ago and loves how life experiences always come full circle. No kidding.
Very true.
Yeah. Last but not least is Heather Elder. Heather has been an agent for over 20 years. She hosts the Dear Art Producer podcast, writes a blog about the industry, and hosts a site for freelance art producers. Mostly though, she is always thinking ahead, and what better time to do that than now. Something personal about her is that something personal about Heather right now is she's surrounded by everyone and everything she needs, including 2 Goldens and a bearded dragon. And then me, I'm Heidi Governman, and I've been with Workbook for about 6 years now. Before that, I was with APA. Something personal about me is that I love karate and haven't done it lately. And I really love my puppy. And after this podcast, after this webinar, I will be taking him on a walk, or he will be taking me, since he's about 115 pounds now. Okay, so we're gonna jump.
Do you want to introduce Ross?
Oh my gosh. How did I not do that? Ross, I'm so sorry.
No worries, it's all right.
No, Ross.
I'm new here. It's okay.
Yes.
Hello, everyone.
What a terrible person I am. Ross is an insurance broker at Taylor & Taylor. And I honestly don't have you on my sheet because I'm a horrible, horrible person. Can you tell us something personal about you, Ross?
Sure. So Taylor & Taylor is a brokerage. We specialize in the entertainment industry, photographers, stylists, videographers, directors, all throughout. Been around for 50 plus years. 3rd generation. My grandfather started the business back in the 1950s. Something about myself, I'm an avid runner. I've run races, including the New York City Marathon. So hello, everyone.
Very cool. And thank you, Heather, for catching that. I apologize profusely, Ross. Really. So we can get started, I think. I would love to start where we left off last week, which was where we were talking about cancellation and postponement and liability and insurance. So my first question is to my producers and Heather. What are your cancellation and postponement policies look like right now? Richard, can we start with you?
Sure. Well, it really depends on, what clients we're dealing with. There are some, certainly right now, there are some state laws as well as federal laws for, if full-time versus, freelance come onto your set. And in terms of COVID related, I think a lot of the rules, they're gray right now, but our policy right now is depending on, how quickly something's canceled. We try to negotiate with most of our vendors. Crew is a little different. We will pay up to 100% of their fees or 50%. Again, depending on whether it's a full-on cancellation or, just a postponement. It can vary, but I do know, again, with some of the laws that are out right now, if you have full-time employees that are coming on set and they're determined to be sick, then there is this, there's the Family Act, which, potentially you're into up to 80 hours of pay to that employee. So that's something that, is going to be interesting in this industry right now to figure out, who covers that, how it gets covered.
Heather, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, sure. It's interesting, since last week we've bid a few jobs, and I've had the experience. I was telling the art producers we're kind of being trailblazers here and figuring out what the terms look like, because based on all the conversations and webinars and things that we've been listening to, our main goals are to make it easy for the client to want to sign up or to approve the job. So we don't want to be too stringent in the terms that we're given, but at the same time, we also want to protect our crew and the people who are, haven't been working at all and are, want to move forward. So we're trying to get cancellations in place that if it's a COVID related, event that we would need to cancel, we're, obviously 100% of any incurred expenses we're looking to recover, but we're also having conversations around the possibility of paying crew 100%, like assistants 100% of their time, regardless of if the job has been shot, and if I'm mincing my words, any unused shoot days. And then I think the other one is, there was something, we're also asking that they try and put in a little contingency for sick pay, so that if somebody is not feeling well, they can raise their hand and say, I'm not feeling well, and not come to set, with the understanding that if they didn't have sick pay, they might, want to come to work thinking they're not really that sick, and they're going to come to work because they need to get paid. So people have been open to that.
People being the
art producers I've been working with have been open to that.
Well, that sort of takes me to both Michael and Katie in that question. Are your clients talking with you about postponements and cancellations? I'll start with Katie, but you have to unmute.
Yeah, sorry. My dog really hates delivery men because they have cardboard boxes, and she's very scared of them, so she was really loud. So our clients really aren't bringing that forward to us. We're bringing it forward to them. So we're kind of having to reverse engineer those conversations. So we're in the stills land, we're actually having to, most of my productions are actually going to CG, in all honesty. It's just the way of the world right now, but one of the ways that we're going around it and still working with photographers is we're creating some hybrid projects in which we're bringing photographers on and partnering them with our CG houses in order to make sure that these final assets look as photoreal as possible. We're finding that that's our best way forward in order to make sure that we get the type of quality content that we're used to seeing without sacrifice. Right now, it's just, we feel like there's too many unknowns, given that I work in the automotive world, and the run up to shooting automotive is 3 weeks minimum. Unfortunately, that there's too many unknowns right now for the type of stuff that I need to produce. If I had the ability to shorten that time for the type of work that we're producing, I think we could counsel our clients to shoot a little bit more, but it's not as easy as that for what we're doing. We are producing stuff for broadcast. They're doing stuff with shooting Jan through her window in her house, and she's doing her own makeup and on Zoom with her wardrobe stylist and her makeup artist doing her own makeup and her wardrobe. So it is really interesting the ways that they're coming up with doing stuff remote. And I actually did have a shoot the week that the world ended, March 16, and we had our creative and our clients Zooming in remote in order to get approvals, which was really fascinating. I think we'll see more and more of that as we move forward.
Michael, can you chime in on this?
Yeah, quite honestly, I literally have to echo everything that Katie said. It is the exact situation that we are in right now. Our clients now, and the thing to know about the work that I do is that I'm in pharma, right? It's all pharma all day, all the time. So we have the very added extra layer of requiring, in many cases, real patients that are at risk. And to be honest, most of the age groups that we shoot are the most at risk right now. So our clients, without a doubt, have embraced exactly what Katie said. We are using CGI and animation to make photorealistic companions and supporting art to the stuff that we shot right before everything shut down. We are also, like Katie said, we are extremely proactively educating our clients about what can happen and about what can't happen. I mean, I think I talk to Heather more than I ever have in my whole life because everything changes every day. The trend that we're starting to see, and again, I can only speak from pharmaceutical with its unique set of rules and things like that. I don't think that we're going to see a big shoot anytime soon. I think that, like Katie said, we're going to have hybrid jobs. I'm going to have a little CGI. I might use a created home photographer if their casting and their location and their studio fits into what we have to shoot. We are definitely considering one-man video interview crews, right? Where someone goes in and sets up in the room and then they leave the room. We Zoom in. I've done more Zoom tests in the past couple of weeks. I never want to see this platform again when this is over. But it's exactly as she said. Now, as far as like who's responsible and writing all those waivers and stuff, we're not awarding jobs, right? We have bid jobs out so that our clients understand that how things are going to take longer. They're going to be more expensive now. We need to have a safe environment, a controlled environment. So we've been exploring those things, but we haven't come to the point where we've had to talk about the cancellation. What I'm even more curious about, and this came from a quick conversation with Richard's partner, Scott, this morning, which I didn't think about. What do you do when the director or the photographer shows up at set and they don't pass the temperature test? Where's that insurance? Is that weather insurance? Is that COVID insurance? Like, this is why I think that our clients are only going to do little puzzle piece shoots until there's a vaccine or there's a standard in place with how to deal with stuff that we're just starting to discuss right now.
Yeah. Are you being asked to add force majeure language
Yes.
to your contracts? Us too.
Yeah. So it's like they just don't want any responsibility for it. And we also have the unique perspective of, because at Juice, we have an internal studio, right? And primarily it works as a production company, right? Because we're hiring directors or photographers. What we have there is the space and the lights, and we can keep the overhead down that way. Our studio is in the middle of an active agency. Just the 45-minute conversation that I had the other day about the traffic flow past the doors of the studio and the rest of the building, so to speak, all of those things are going to have to be worked out, and we're going to have to present that to our clients. And then the next question is going to be, so you haven't done this yet, so prove it. So there's going to be that stage with our clients as well, I guarantee it.
Doug, can you explain force majeure?
Sure. Typically, you'll see situations where both sides of the transaction, of the contract on the production side and on the client side, will have provisions that govern what happens if we've got to cancel or postpone for this reason or that reason. And then quite often you'll see this force majeure provision that attempts to try to be a catch-all. So, you know, at its simplest, the force majeure is supposed to say, hey, look, if something unexpected happens that's outside of everybody's control, and because of this, we can't do the job, then this is what's going to happen. And the traditional ideas about what force majeure were tended to be some sort of national disaster, some sort of, war, riot, that kind of thing. And COVID is kind of interesting. What exactly is a force majeure is going to be governed by the language of the particular contract. And the language in the contract is going to vary from contract to contract. And Ross may be able to speak to this. Quite often insurance will have force majeure and they may define it differently. So my feeling and my advice with people is, I don't know that I would continue to rely on force majeure for this COVID scenario, because one, not everybody may agree that a COVID type of situation is a force majeure. And we've now moved, I think, from the position where force majeure, which typically is something that none of us could have expected or prepared for. So here's what we're going to do. Now we're in a situation where, we can reasonably expect that COVID is going to continue to present a meaningful risk of some sort of disruption for the next foreseeable future. So, I encourage the parties to be having more detailed conversations beforehand going in about these contingencies and what exactly are we going to do, and put that plan into place as best they can in the contract documents, rather than just rely on what can sometimes be sort of broad and general and amorphous force majeure clauses.
Hey, Doug, I have a
Yeah,
question.
I have a question here.
I'm sorry.
No,
Our
no,
clients
please.
have also been throwing around the term hold harmless clauses. Is that the same thing, or is that something else that's going to be a new piece of documentation?
So a hold harmless is, and also kind of goes into with indemnity provisions, which governs what happens if there's some sort of loss or injury, and that could be a loss to personal property. That could be what they consider, and what Ross would be familiar with, which is sort of first-party losses, which is loss to the client or the artist because of property loss or interruption. Or there could be third-party losses, which are, say, somebody gets hurt and sues, or somebody else's third-party property gets injured, and what to do with that. So indemnity and hold harmless provisions, what they try to do is they try to assign and determine beforehand who's going to be responsible for what kind of loss. The force majeure can sometimes work a little bit almost as an exception to that, which is that typically says, hey, look, in this contract, you have this obligation and I have this obligation. I agree to show up on X date and shoot these shots, or I'm the producer, I agree to show up with this crew on this date and produce the shot. And force majeure tends to be the out clause for that, which says, if I can't satisfy the obligations that I've taken on in this contract because of a force majeure event, here's what's going to happen. Indemnity tries to shift around risk as to who's going to be responsible for various different types and categories of damage and loss.
Ross, can you weigh in on all of those questions from Doug?
Sure. So first of all, I agree 100% with Doug that the production company or the photographer and the advertiser or the client need to iron out all these things before they even start a project going forward, because insurance right now is not going to be one of those things you're going to be able to rely on. If a photographer or director didn't come to set because of sickness or accident, there is a policy out there. It's called non-appearance coverage, but the carriers aren't offering it right now, especially during this whole pandemic. Most insurance policies usually cover reshoots or cancellations for damage to property or damage to locations. And since there really hasn't been any of that, it's not going to, none of these cancellations are going to trigger any sort of insurance claim coverage. And going forward, we are not really sure what's going to be available in the marketplace. And we don't know if it's going to be expensive or what terms or conditions are going to be on these policies. But so again, the other thing that a lot of people are concerned about is injury and sickness to workers on set. Is that workers' compensation? Is it not? That answer in some states has not been determined at all. In some other states, they're making judgments on a case-by-case basis. So I would say going forward, cancellation provisions, addendums to contracts, that's going to be the best tool to cover and assume risk or deviate risk in these types of situations.
Can I
So,
ask Ross a question? And this may go us on a little bit of a tangent, but I know that this has come up quite a bit with people who have been concerned, especially producers, about and clients about risk for crew or talent from COVID. And there is, as Ross mentioned, this sort of possible workers' comp avenue, and largely it hasn't been totally determined and could vary from state to state with respect to whether workers' comp would cover a crew member if they got COVID. My question to Ross is if there's any other potential product that may cover, for instance, if a crew member gets sick and then sues the producer or the client that says, hey, look, for negligence that you didn't have a safe set and you weren't abiding by CDC guidelines, would that be something that possibly could be covered by something like a employment practices liability EPL type policy?
So just for someone that doesn't have an employment practice liability, if they just have like a general liability policy, most of those policies have exclusions for communicable diseases and or virus or bacteria. So the liability issue is it's policy by policy. For workers' compensation, if that person is injured and it's deemed to be a covered workers' compensation claim, workers' compensation is sole remedy. So they really can't go after anyone else. So again, it's gonna be on a case-by-case basis. Do I see any sort of coverage for liability from a COVID claim? Probably at this point, no. Employment practices, would it cover if someone came after their employer for a work-related injury? I can say no, because workers' compensation is sole remedy. So that's not going to be covered at all. Again, going forward, will there be insurance products out there that will help cover these types of risks? Maybe, possibly, but I don't know.
So I have, since we're here, this is to you, Doug. Can an owner of a corporation be found personally responsible for COVID-related negligence, thus shattering the protections of their corporation? And I believe the term is called negligent officer.
Right. So, you know, as Ross mentioned, there typically if a worker gets injured on a job, typically that tends to, the exclusive remedy is to go through a workers' comp claim. And depending on the workers' comp policy, it may or may not cover something like a COVID situation. There is a possibility, like I referred to before, which is that theoretically there possibly could be a claim that could get you outside of workers' comp for negligence. Like you opened up and had a shoot that in a part of the country where it wasn't allowed, or you weren't being reasonable in providing basic protections to prevent people from getting sick, that sort of thing. And in negligence type cases, typically that would go against the corporation. However, again, it is theoretically possible that you could have a claim against an individual as an officer or a director that would extend beyond just the corporate liability and could expose the director or officer to personal liability in that limited circumstance where that individual played an active and direct role in the unreasonable conduct that led to the injury.
And
Again,
so
that's gonna, sorry, just one little caveat to that. These issues surrounding negligence, surrounding what kind of protections have to be provided to employees, who's an employee, who's an independent contractor, these are largely governed by state law. These are state law issues, and there can be variations from state to state. And to try to determine which state law applies is affected by what the parties say in their contract, and it can also be affected by things like where the parties' offices are located and where the shoot takes place and where the crew and the talent actually show up to do their work. So these kinds of issues are the type of thing that I would encourage everybody to talk in detail with their counsel in their particular state to try to work through these issues and protect against them, because that negligence liability that we just discussed, the rules in California are going to be different than the rules, say, in any other state where you may be shooting.
There's a question coming in directly. Ross, are you suggesting that producers and or photographers should put every crew member on payroll versus 1099 so that workers' comp could kick in via payroll taxes to cover any potential injury?
So even if they're paid on payroll or not, doesn't really trigger workers' compensation. Workers' compensation is going to be eligible for any employee that the state deems an employee, 1099 or W-2. So that it doesn't really matter from that perspective. What it comes down to is if the workers' compensation boards in whatever state the claim happens deems that whatever injury they sustained is eligible for workers' compensation benefits. It's going to be very, very hard to prove that someone got sick on set or from rising out of the production. So again, it's kind of an unknown, but each state's going to have to make up their own mind on what's covered and what's not covered.
Is there a conversation happening in your industry, Ross, that is talking about solutions to these problems? Or, you know, I mean, I hate to put you like directly on the spotlight, but, you know, obviously these are issues that are coming up, not just in this industry. So is there a lot of talk about new things new products coming towards, you know, the universe in this regard?
It's one of those things that we're taking it one day at a time too. We're trying to get all the answers from the carriers and trying to get, like, hey, can you offer this? Or can you offer this? The terms keep changing, but I can tell you that going forward, getting certain types of coverages that are out there may be impossible. Carriers are definitely looking to restrict coverage, and they're putting, if your policy for some reason doesn't have a communicable disease exclusion or some type of exclusion, my guess is it's probably going to be on there on your renewal if you try to get a policy going forward. So we're working on it. There's been a huge discussion on what offerings are going to be out there, but I don't know.
That's really fair, and I appreciate you being so honest and candid. So I wanted to move on to policies and protocols. We talked a little bit about this last week, and so I want to move towards the producers and Heather. Your guidelines and protocols, what are they based on, and how would you advise others to get started on these? Jamie, I'd love to go to you if that's, I haven't heard your voice yet.
Sure.
I'm feeling like a little, I'd love to hear from you.
Sure. It's a great question. I think that a lot of us have been soaking in as much information from any number of sources. And, unfortunately, we don't currently have a trade organization that speaks specifically to our types of production for stills that go up to, non-union broadcast even. So I think the best we can do is we go with the CDC guidelines, other trade organizations, AICP, ASMP, they're great resources. I've been looking at different state film commissions. Georgia has different plans, especially states that are opening up sooner might have more information than ones that are having still a bit of an issue. So really it's just, I'm going through so much information all the time. Sometimes it's just an overload, and people are passing along different protocols. We currently have not published anything. I'm waiting until we hear from all the different unions and trade organizations in certain states. So on that end, I'm sort of conservative. I would rather have it be as right as possible up to the moment after I've heard from all of this before it's something that, we release to the world. But there is a lot of information out there and can get a little overwhelming, but I think sticking with some of the best trade organizations is the best way to start.
We had a lot of questions in terms of your policies and protocols about travel last week. There was a lot in the questions that we didn't get to. And so I was wondering, what are you guys, Richard and Heather, what are you thinking about travel at this juncture in terms of like cruise, accommodations, air travel to maybe places that are not as restricted as maybe New York, California, Massachusetts? That's a big question. I understand that I just threw in the whole kitchen sink, but I'd love to hear from Heather and then Richard.
Nobody's traveling yet. No one is interested in getting on a plane yet. People are, any estimates that we're doing right now are for the area in which the photographer lives. Although there is one estimate where we're giving the option, like let's do a New York version so that if we end up shooting this in August and we're able to travel, we have that in place. Does that answer your question? Like what specifically about travel were you asking?
Well, just in terms of how are you estimating it, would you be considering doing jobs in areas that have less restrictions?
So yeah, right this very second, no, people are not thinking about getting on a plane too much. I'm not saying that they wouldn't, it changes by the second. I think the preference is to shoot locally if they can with a small crew. But when we do get to that point, people are going to want to work. And if they feel like they can travel safely, then they will. And we'll hire crew locally if we can. Otherwise, we'll travel the crew as well. But I think right now, people are trying to do whatever they can local, if possible.
So, Richard, I want to sort of shift gears with you in my question. Is anyone discussing these issues in terms of the talent agencies and casting agencies? It seems one of the questions from last week is, it seems that crews will be careful. These are the people that these are the people that you use in a consistent manner. But what about the talent? How do you... And I hate to say it like this, but this is exactly how the question was worded from Vagar last week, which was, how do you trust the talent in that, I guess, with the cancellation policies, and what if they're sick, and how do you know, and things like that? Would you maybe weigh in on that for me?
Yeah, sure, because we have been actually doing some castings, and I would say that I would echo what Heather was saying is, no one is traveling, very rarely. I will say I have had one project where someone did, but it's really unique. And we're actually in the process of a project right now where it's all local. So we're picking up local, everyone is local. There's no one that's traveling, maybe if possible, they're within driving distance. And I know for me personally, being in New York, I sort of feel we're a little bit, with a stamp on us. I know I'm not going to go to travel right now to California, but we have an office in California. That's where Scott is, and he can take care of California. But to go back to your question about talent, I think the majority of talent that we're looking at, you have to trust them. You give them guidelines. You educate your client. We're doing a final go-see in the next day or so, live go-see to the client, directly to the client, the last 7 talent that were looked at. So not in the studio. We've done a lot of Zoom things, a lot of personal, educated the talent about what the pictures should look like, compiled them and presented them. But again, most of the talent, they're not traveling. No one is traveling. Like right now, they're doing the in-home thing where there's a shoot that we were talking to today where it was a family, just mom, dad, 3 kids in their house. We've also seen the same thing, family going to the photographer's house. We haven't seen anything outside of that. But yeah, castings. I spoke to a number of casting directors this morning, as well as agents. And they are posting things, they're hearing things, but some clients are okay with seeing this new way of casting where it's not good. It's selfies. It's not a great way to cast. Others don't mind. But yeah, talent are like anyone else on the crew. You have to educate them on where they're going to be. But right now it's not the same industry, at least right now anyway. no one's doing, like Michael said, the big pharma shoots are not happening.
So I'm noticing Michael really nodding his head. Did you want to have anything to add on that, Michael?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was just subconsciously agreeing with everything. Yeah, but nobody's there are certain clients that we work for that are not allowed to travel right now. So it's not even a possibility.
Yeah,
so
agreed.
it's not. There has been no talk of, the only talk of travel has come in terms of talking about next year. But I was just agreeing with everything he said. I'll keep my head steady from that.
No, I liked seeing it. It was like, I liked it, but I just wanted to check in with you. And honestly, so you were talking about how you're doing estimates right now, but you're not doing any actual, planning productions and so on. So on that note, when you're seeing the estimates come through, Michael, are you noticing a lot of difference, a lot of new line items, and are your clients aware that those things are coming? Or, both you and Katie said you're educating your clients right now. So sort of wanted you to expand on that.
Yeah, no, it's been a great exercise, because every estimate that's put together is just full of caveats. And the conversation starts off with, this is what we think we can do today if a certain state is clear by September. And, so everything has to line. It's like green lights down the road till the end of the century. So that's pretty much where it's at right now. We are going forward in some cases with trying to find who the creative partner should be for the creative team, right? Some launches are inevitable. The dates won't move. So we need to find them those partners. So that's been great, because they get to have the creative call. They get to do their treatments. I can see who's going to accentuate the team in creating the content. But what we're not getting is that sign off from our clients into which direction to go. Is it going to be a photo shoot? Are we going to find an animation solution? Are we doing time-lapse paper cutouts? I mean, there's so many ways to approach it right now. So that's how the bidding and the estimating is going for us right now, because our clients will not commit to anything.
Katie, I noticed you nodding too. Oh, Heather.
No, go ahead.
Please.
Someone else can go. I can check. I was just going to say that we're seeing our estimates are looking different as well. I mean, there are some line items that are removed, and there are, but mostly the biggest, and there's obviously some line items that are added, but the biggest change is thinking about the approach to the job, because we're trying to keep our crew to 10 or less, including the talent. So no more than 10 people on set at the same time. And that's hard, because one of the estimates needs video and one is just all stills, but we're trying to kind of figure out what that dance is going to look like and who is going to take on what role. And there's a lot more pre-production that is going to need to be involved before we can even get to set. So those parts of the line items are increasing as well.
We've been really careful to try to educate our clients about that. Like, look, it's going to take longer to set this up and make sure it's safe and controlled and everybody's happy. But it also means that we're going to, those gigantic library shoots of shooting endlessly for 12 hours a day, they're not happening. That's just over.
Yeah. We were at the pinnacle of our well-oiled machine right before this happened. And now we're just cut at the knee. So,
because I just had a 5-day shoot in LA where, you're right, it was a finely tuned machine, photo and video, like more content than the team knows what to do with. Right. That's been a big conversation with clients to make them understand, like, you have to be more choiceful in the upfront, and you have to be more precise and make your minds up.
Yeah, we've tightened our crews as well, and we've gotten down to, even to 4 or 5 at most.
Definitely.
To do both broadcast and still. Most of the guys that we're plugging in right now are dual, or they have multiple capabilities. It's not just a one-off person, like one digital tech. The digital tech's also a first AC. He's also a DIT. He can handle the video. My DPs they're editors, they're drone operators, they're great directors themselves. They come with a lot of capabilities. So I have a team of 4 that we can turn things around, and have been. So,
Richard, you're saying something really important. The idea of capabilities, I think, is really rising to the top right now. Being able to communicate clearly what your capabilities are, either as a photographer, a producer, an assistant, a stylist. It's not just about your talent anymore. It really is, people need to know what you're capable of creating for them or doing or pulling off or whatever it is. And, you know, being able to communicate that clearly is really, really important.
Jamie,
Yeah, I
I was
think
hoping,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say,
Katie, go ahead.
you're going to be infinitely useful right now.
Yeah.
Because we're not going to be able to place many people on set, and I know the game that we're playing right now is staving off clients' wants for ballparks because their budgets are getting cut and cut and cut, but they want to know what they can do with the money that they do still have in pocket, which means that we have to get really, really crafty, which means spending a lot more time sitting with that money and ballparking and estimating on our side, and spending time coming up with 6 different ways to approach one project. So, you know, to your point, Heather, people who are able to communicate what they can bring to the table, but also communicating that they can wear multiple different hats and pull off all of those different roles at once and do so with grace and efficiency, that's going to be really key.
Well, and to Michael's point, prove it. Like do a case study, go out there and do what you say you're going to be able to do, and then talk about it and share it so that you have
You've known me for a long time, Heather. You know what a pain in the ass I am. But I have to say, one of the most disappointing things about this whole COVID pandemic, the most amazing thing has been that the whole community has pulled together. This is like the 4th or 5th time I've talked to people. I learn stuff every time from everybody that I interact with. What drives me nuts is when somebody sends me we got this one person shoot solution and there's no case study. I can't go any further with that than you have to understand there's 12 other people I need to show the
Yeah, Michael, I would agree with you, and yeah, we agree. You have to be able to show that you can do it. Heather, I think you know that we had something last year we did as well.
Yeah.
Really, really tight and run on a small crew. I would like to say one other thing too about the sets and what they're looking like. Something that we've been finding is I know there's been this remote digital viewing for clients who are not on set. And one of the things that we've been finding is that it's good to have, we haven't quite given it a name yet, but someone to monitor, instead of the creatives being able to voice and talk on set, there's a lot of crosstalk that goes on. We're starting to use much more texting and have someone combine the questions immediately to go on set, as opposed to back and forth or choppy, or the Wi-Fi goes down, or it's it's more of a data management person who's controlling a lot of the cameras, but also controlling from one person how that information is being presented back to the photographer or the director. And so
we're calling that person the gatekeeper. It's a new role. It's a new role on set. You have to be able to communicate from multiple remote points of feedback. I'm telling you, until you do some of these Zoom recordings, it all sounds fun and great, but once Richard is right, there has to be a communication protocol. Everyone can't talk at once. I mean, those set protocols are even more important now that we're in these digital interfaces, because I've seen it happen already practically. So
well, and you're going to have less time on set, so you can't spend all this time going back and forth and what did you say, and wait a minute, I'm doing this, come back to it. Like, we really have to be efficient with the time that we have.
Well, to your point, Heather, pre-production is the key, is pre-production and really nailing it down and getting it tight. Pre-production is where it's all going to be. You hit the ground and, boots on the ground and you're running, and communication.
You know what though? That was the truth of the matter before this happened. Good pre-pro always led to successful production. So we're just reiterating what we already know.
Right. for the last shoot that I had, that was March 16 through 19, which was like the last shoot on Earth. We had our pre-light day, and we literally went through every single angle on our shot list, which was 12 shots. We got those approved with our creative while we were shooting them, sent them to the client, said, you have till 9 a.m. tomorrow morning to approve these angles. They approved them, and that's how we got our shoot done. Otherwise, there was no way to do it. So I think having pre-light days like that, your pre-light day is going to be your best friend moving forward. You're going to have to start building them in, even if they're going to be an extra shoot day.
So I want to change directions because we have just a little bit of time left. And I wanted to go back to Doug and Ross for just a second, because we're starting to wrap up towards the end of the webinar. So I wanted to just ask you, what advice do both of you have for the commercial artists moving forward in terms of, you know, what are the must-haves that they should be doing right now? And what are some of the pitfalls as they are trying to create their documents and their protocols moving forward? Ross, can I start with you?
Sure. So from an insurance standpoint, the basic minimums that any photographer right now should have is definitely workers' compensation for the crew, property coverage for equipment, prop sets and wardrobe, physical property, general liability, and if they're renting vehicles, auto liability. And then it's a discussion with your client on whether they want to pursue other insurances such as non-appearance or weather insurance or cast insurance. I'm not sure what those terms, pricing, exclusions are going to be, but if they want to be proactive in that insurance conversation, there really should be a discussion with the client. So they're all on the same page of what insurance is covering and what insurance is not covering. Indemnification sections of contracts are way broader than what insurance covers. There could be some contract language that kind of irons out cancellations, postponements, non-appearances, that sort of thing. And I'm sure Doug will talk more about that right now.
Doug, do you?
Gosh, my biggest piece of advice is to call Ross. Really, you know, have these conversations with your insurance broker and be talking about, you know, get into specifics about the kinds of risks that you're concerned about and the kind of risks that you face, and try to explore what the options are. I think having robust policies right now to the best of your budget and your ability is going to be your best friend. The other thing is with, you know, specifically with respect to COVID, it's to stay up to date and keep doing your research. This is largely a situation that across the board and across all industries we're facing issues that we've never seen before, and it's constantly changing. And the fact that we have primarily chosen to take a states-based approach rather than a federal approach means that things are changing at different speeds in different places, and every state is going to have their own guidelines and advisories about what's reasonable. And in fact, every county, you're starting to see, especially in California, county by county, these can be different. So really pay attention to where you're going to be shooting, do the research on the state, local and federal level about what the guidelines are to be safe. And now when you have a little bit of a lull in business, I think is a time to really build up your team, build up your insurance team, build up your legal team. Like I said, a lot of this is governed by state law, which is going to be different, and really you shouldn't be expected to be able to navigate all these legal issues on your own. They dovetail quite a bit with employment related issues, which is another big topic for an entirely different day. But that's also state by state. In California, we're becoming much more strict about who's allowed to be an independent contractor, and more people are being treated by employees. And as employees, they've got you have a lot more responsibilities and liabilities as their employer. Sorry, there's noise in the background. But if you haven't done so already, now's a good time to reach out to your legal team, to reach out to your insurance team, and same conversations that you're having with your client partners. Let's try to sit through and think through all of these different contingencies and build up the best plan in advance.
Can I add something to that? I think these are two great pieces of advice of like where to start when you try to figure out what your own terms would be with your client. So figure out where you're exposed and what's important to you and what you need to do in terms of liability. And then when you have an opportunity with a client to talk about liability and what would happen if a shoot was canceled or a photographer got sick or something, you're speaking from a point of you're educated on what your own policies cover and what they don't. So you know exactly whether you can step on set and if you're covered, or you have a plan in place with your client or you don't.
That's really smart. So I'm going to go around to everybody and ask, a last bit of advice that you'd like to give the audience and also your silver lining. So I'm going to start with Doug and Ross to tell us, out of all of this, you just gave us your advice, but out of all of this mess that's going on, what are the silver linings that you can, share with us? I always like to end on a positive note. So Doug, if you wouldn't mind starting.
Yeah, no, I think, look, I think the fact that you're having these conversations right now is a silver lining, because that me shows optimism in the industry, that people are optimistic that things are going to come back, and there are going to be jobs to be had. Things are going to be different, and I also think that necessity is the mother of invention. So you will find new ways to address all of these challenges, and my silver lining is I think that ultimately when things go back to whatever normal they're going to be, we're going to have new tools and new thoughts and new conversations to continue to make it a more efficient and more profitable business.
Ross?
So echoing a lot of what was said, but yeah, have a strong insurance team, a strong legal team, have good relationships with your clients. Just be open and honest, and a discussion is always the first step towards any good thing. Follow the OSHA guidelines, CDC guidelines, work safe. And the silver lining is, in the past 2 weeks, I received numerous calls about agencies and clients really wanting to get back to work. And the start of the engine, the hardest push is in the beginning. It's all downhill from there. So I think we're going to start to see a lot of good.
Jamie, I wanted to go to you. I feel like we haven't chatted enough here, but I do want to hear from you.
I would echo something similar. Research and reach out. Of course, insurance and law support. I just feel like, and also your colleagues that you either may know or may not know. And I think that sort of wraps into my silver lining, is that I've, met any number of producers that I have known their names, but I haven't known their faces. Now I'm seeing their faces all the time. Now I'm, meeting people on Zoom calls that I may not have been on set with yet, but, hopefully those yets will be soon enough that we will be on set together. And I just appreciate everybody's, everything that everyone's putting into it. I did want a quick note for the art producers who were talking about educating their clients so much. I really appreciate that. Any conversation I've had with art producers, they are spending a lot of time having these conversations, which make it easier when the projects come my way to be able to work with them to figure out the best solution. And hopefully we can get rolling soon-ish.
Katie, would you give us, some parting advice and your silver linings?
Yeah, I guess advice, I would just kind of echo everybody else's advice, which is just like read and ask as many questions as possible. I think, there's no stupid questions right now. I always get in my head about asking questions, and right now there's information everywhere, and there's a million questions to ask and a million more that spark out of every single other question. So just continue to ask. I know I have a million questions constantly. And then the thing that I've really enjoyed is the constant innovation that's coming out of this. I think we're going to see a world that's a little bit different when we come out of this, but still a really interesting world and a super creative world. And it's really inspiring to me.
Richard, can I go to you? Thank you, Katie.
Yeah, I'll say the same thing, echo most of that. I think, communication, get your procedures and your policies in place, follow all the guidelines that are out there. Look, we're just all going to be mitigating our risk at this point. That's what it's about. And for us, the silver lining is we're excited. We have lots of clients who they are chomping at the bit. It's going to break open, and just be ready for when it does break open, and keep your teams tight and know who those teams are. Rely on the partners that you've, built good relationships with. But, bottom line, communication on all levels, back to the rep, to the client, through the agency, the account execs. Those account people are talking to the art buyers, and the art buyers are talking to the account, and the account talks to the client. And so communication, but it will come back in a different form, and the innovation is exciting,
Michael, thank you so much, Richard. Michael, could you give us some
Yeah,
more?
I think, my parting advice would be, what Heather had brought up before. If you're going to present a solution to somebody like me, who's going to fight tooth and nail to support the artists that they work with and collaborate with, sometimes at the agency's expense, I need to know that the solution that you put forth, that you've at least tested it, that you can stand behind it, so that I can stand behind you. And I think that that's really important right now, because in the past, if I ran into that 3/4 of the way through the project, I kind of there's solutions, there's things I could do. But now, with everything being so important in the pre-pro and in the planning stage, that's, again, I just would reiterate that. If you have a solution that you want to share, just make sure that we can have an intelligent conversation about that. I think the silver lining is these 9 squares up here right now. This is this community within this business is unlike any other. If we were all selling different brands of potato chips and fighting over shelf space, we would not be having this conversation. But the silver lining for me is this community where we're all going for the same thing. We're all going for the same jobs. We're all trying to produce high quality for our clients. But the collaboration and the sharing of information, that's been really inspiring over the past 71 days, let's say.
Yeah.
So.
Who's counting?
71 days. Wow. Heather, I'd like to, end with you. I'm sorry, Katie, did you want to say something?
I just said it was the longest Thursday in March.
It's true. Heather, I'd love to sort of go to you.
A lot of people, especially Michael just said it, the advice is go and prove what you say you can do. I think that's really, really important. We have some time on our hands, and you can, there's lots of great conversations happening out there, but now, put it into practice if you can, and come up with a case study and talk to your insurance broker and your lawyer right now. I think come to the table prepared. And as everyone here also said, the silver lining is just, I've been doing this for 25 years, and my relationships I treasure them so much, but they've gotten so much more. I've met so many more people, and, developed the relationships even deeper now. And I wouldn't have had the time or the opportunity to do that. So I've really been appreciative of that.
Well, my silver lining, thank you, Heather, so much. But my silver lining is what it always is that I get to do this. I get to meet all of you guys. And I have the time to do that now. But I also, I'm excited to get back, if I ever get back to doing my regular job. But this is definitely my silver lining, is getting to spend Fridays. Fridays are a joyful day because of this panel. I always end up feeling really positive afterwards. And so starts my weekend off correctly and puts me in a good frame of mind. So I want to thank you all for helping me do that this week. Again, I want to just a big apology to Ross for the improper introduction. It was, I I never make the same mistake twice. I'm just sorry that I made it with you today. Somebody told me that once in business, never make the same mistake twice. So I just apologize for making that mistake with you, because you obviously were such an incredibly integral part to this panel. And I just genuinely appreciate you taking time to spend with us today. And Doug, that you came back again. Oh, thank you so much, Ross. And then Doug, that you came back for round 2. I mean, that's just so wonderful. Katie, thank you so much. Jamie, I didn't hear you a ton, but I really did love the things that you had to say today. And Richard and Michael, you guys are just so darn smart, and it was a pleasure listening to you guys. So, and as always, Heather, thank you so much. And I just wanted to take the time to say, this matters to a lot of people. Like every week I get emails and feedback about how much, how helpful this panel is. So I just cannot thank you all enough for taking the time to spend with us today.
Thank you.
So now we're gonna do the wave. So thanks everybody.
Bye.